Hey guys, welcome to this week's Money and Investing Show, and we are on for a cracker. We are talking about the buzzword of today, which is the importance of being able to pivot. What does it mean? What does that mean within the economy? How a business is surviving and thriving? But perhaps most importantly, you and yourself and on your journey. How can you pivot with confidence and get the outcome that you truly deserve? I know you're going to enjoy the show. I'll see you in there. Hey there guys, welcome to this week's Money and Investing Show with me, your host Andrew Baxter, and as always my faithful companion and offsider, Mr. Mitchell Lorenzo.
What a pleasant intro that is. Thank you, Mr. B, for having me. It's really exciting. And I want to chat about something even more exciting. It's the buzzword, the fresh, hip thing out there, and that is the almighty pivot. The importance of the pivot.
The pivot, okay, yeah, that's definitely, you can't go anywhere on Instagram or Facebook without some business guru saying if you don't pivot, you're going to be dead, and quite frankly, it's good advice. So what is it? What does it do? How are we going to look at this? What structure have you got for us today?
Well, I think there's three levels to the pivot. We've obviously got the economy, given that we're seeing such challenging times, businesses, surviving in the economy, and then yourself as well, because it's important to draw it back to, the most core level that you can. But before we touch on each of those levels and what they mean, let's dive into what actually is a pivot. What does that mean?
Okay, I suppose it's the buzzword. You've got to be flexible and adaptive, I think is really what we're driving at in essence with the pivot. And never has it been more important a time to be flexible and adaptive in the approach you're taking and being able to pivot your business or pivot your investment strategies or your own personal life right now. If we look at it from starting off from an economics point of view, we are in a recession. We've been in recession officially now for something like 6 weeks. I think in reality, we've probably been in recession for closer to 14 months. And by that, I mean, lack of wage growth, mortgage delinquencies, people that are actually behind their mortgage has been, at record highs in every state and territory. Last year, not this year, last year, those signs were already showing through. So, we're definitely in a recession, and that's a big shock for many, many people because, the lucky country as we are, we've been in boom times now for close to 30 years.
And I don't think many people saw this coming. I think, coronavirus was almost the straw that broke the camel's back. But I know you've been chatting about, a recession and things coming, for probably 2 years now. You just walk along the high street. We've done a whole podcast on that.
Yep.
It looked pretty grim even before coronavirus.
Absolutely, and this has been the tipping point, I think, for many businesses. I'm sure we'd explore. But you've got unemployment officially, 6.5% or
Something
so.
like that.
The Treasurer came out this week and said 13 is probably a more realistic number.
It's a bit scary when Josh Frydenberg tells you that maybe it's a little bit worse than what you think.
Yeah, and I mean that just shows the disparity between the unemployment measures, seasonally adjusted versus reality and other things. And to be quite honest, and without being a scaremonger, I wouldn't at all be surprised to see that number almost double and see unemployment up in the 20s.
And why is that?
Look, combination of factors. I think the recession that we're going to be in is going to run a lot longer than people are talking about. They've talked about V-shaped recoveries, W recession recoveries, sawtooth recoveries, L-shape. I don't think we're particularly well equipped. If you look at the actual structural nature of the Aussie economy, the lack of manufacturing and so on and so forth has meant that getting that organic growth back into your economy is going to be quite tricky for a service-driven economy. And look, quite frankly, I think also some of the government responses to try and stimulate the economy, particularly in terms of benefits, cash payments and things like that, are out of kilter with a message to get people back to work. The safety net, and I know this is going to sound pretty cold-hearted, but the safety net's too comfy.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a couple of friends of mine, and I won't name names, of course. They could easily go back to work, but why not? They get to keep JobKeeper, get $750 a week and play Xbox and watch Netflix.
With unemployment the way it is, and as you know, we're recruiting like mad at the moment. We're running ads, and the thinness of the response because people are just going, I'm just going to take a bit of time off and go for a surf is diabolical, and so measures need to be put in play. That's a bit on the economy though. So it's tough. It's been tough for a little while, and I think it's going to be quite hard work getting out. And so, roll the sleeves up and brace yourself for a real tough one. So unless you're prepared to pivot and make some fairly direct changes, either your business and or you personally are going to suffer massively in this environment.
Okay, well, let's dive into what it looks like in a business sense then, because as we know, there's guys out there that are just surviving, there's ones that are thriving, and there's ones that are basically dead. Now, you mentioned Meyer and David Jones. It's something to do with QBE Insurance Group.
Yeah.
What's that all about?
One of the things that flicked up on my radar, and for anyone that's new to the world of trading, investing, learning fundamentals and what's important can be quite challenging. And I'm a news addict, as you all know. So something came across my screen about 2 weeks ago, and QBE have actually cancelled their insurance for people that sell product to David Jones and Meyer. It's called, I think it's retail insurance or wholesale insurance. It's to ensure that you get paid for the goods that you supply.
Sure.
And their decision to do that really, if you read between the lines, is saying we're pretty gloomy as to your outlook. In fact, we're almost suggesting that you're likely to go into administration and we're not prepared to backstop it. And when you see an organisation like QBE, which is a major player in that space, going, yeah, we're not doing this anymore, you'd be pretty smart to really listen to that. And look, those businesses, David Jones and Myer, yes, they're suffering, of course they are, with COVID and lack of foot traffic, but they've been dead businesses now for probably 18 months to 2 years in terms of my observations and seeing how they work. And again, it's that slowness and outright refusal to pivot. And if you look back history, success always leaves clues, and so too does history. If you look back, Kodak didn't want to get into digital photography because it would cannibalize their film business, even though they invented digital photography. They ended up going bankrupt. If you look at the likes of Fairfax as a business that's been slowly in demise, it didn't want to invest in realestate.com, it didn't want to invest in carsales.com, it didn't want to invest in seek.com.
Great businesses.
All of them are multi-billion-dollar businesses, and it refused to put in 25 to 50 million as seed capital at the start because it didn't want to cannibalize its existing business. It was fearful of damaging what it had and missed out on the future.
It didn't pivot.
Total failure to pivot of the most extreme order. And there are plenty of other case studies that you can go into in that. So businesses have to be nimble. Now, in the case of Myer, for example, and look, unashamedly, my wife and I, we're building, as you know, I just went to buy a couple of decent 85-inch TVs for the new place. And we've been Myer Platinum 1 clients for many years. They've been very kind. They've taken us to Melbourne Cup on a number of occasions. Done some really nice stuff. We've been good customers there, particularly my wife. And we called them and say, hey, we're looking for a couple of TVs. This is what we're after. This price. What can you do? And they're like, yeah, no, we can't do that price, and it's going to cost you to be delivered, and we can't get them to you for 6 weeks. And yet you can walk into Harvey Norman as a total unknown and walk out with the same goods for a couple of grand less than the price.
Is it a cultural issue that we're finding?
Look, I think they're very set in their ways from a cultural perspective, absolutely, and they've been very late to adopt to the idea of click and pay. Or click and pick up, where you actually buy it online, but you physically have to go to the store. I don't know why you would want to buy something online and then go to the store to pick it up.
Try it on
it totally defeats the object of the whole exercise. But the whole idea of click and deliver. And I went on Myer's page this morning, and their ability to deliver right now, express delivery, same day, or express or delivery within 3 to 8 business days, is currently not available in the middle of the time when you want people to be able to shop online. So they're almost writing their own death warrant.
Well, I think, QBE, the insurer not giving them insurance, it's like a life insurance provider not giving you life insurance because they know you're going to die.
Yeah.
It's the exact same thing.
You've got massive lung problems, you're about to have a heart attack, and you're there with a slab of beer and a packet of cigarettes. I mean, you're doing yourself in. And it's not something that's just COVID related. I mean, these businesses have been on the outer and struggling for an awful long time. I mean, Myer listed it, was it $4.60? I think it was back in 2006. Might have been $4.90, but it's somewhere in that ballpark. Back in 2006, it's currently worth 22 cents per share.
Rubbish.
So that's what happens when your business doesn't pivot and doesn't have an eye on the future. And when it eventually does make an attempt to do that, it's very half-assed, not committed. And the broader issue with these types of businesses is more cultural as well.
Sure.
If we look at the rise of the specialty store, Lulu is probably the default we go to on that incredible business. You go to the specialist store, North Face. You get what you want, you have that sort of experience within stores. So that's also really hit the big department stores to a way. But it comes down to culture, and it's this culture of excellence. And the real success stories in online, COVID hasn't resulted in online shopping becoming great. 20 years ago, 6% of US retail sales were online. 2019, it was 19%. From 2019 to date, which is 7 months, it's 26%. So you've seen the 10 years worth of growth in online sales in the US in the last 7 months. Phenomenal growth. Why has that been? Well, with companies like Amazon and Zappos, which unfortunately is now owned by Amazon, the culture that they create is an online culture. Building an online business and pivoting online isn't just, we've got a website now. It's everything that goes behind that in terms of the service, the customer experience, and the deliverability.
Sure, and I know you've mentioned this plenty of times as a proxy for how we should, run our culture within our organisation is to be obsessed with customer service. Everything you do is improving that. I know with Amazon, you order something and they quote you 10 days shipping, it's there in 7 because they want to make you feel good.
Exactly right, and those small wins really engender that brand to you. Yeah, and I mean, we've had to pivot too. We predominantly run a seminar business, and come the end of February, that was the end of that. So within 2-3 weeks, we've pivoted and everything is online. But because you don't get that face-to-face interaction, you've got to build so much more from a resources point of view to be able to establish that relationship and have that trust built, albeit online, as opposed to sitting across a table or in a ballroom or an auditorium talking to someone. So it's been very, very interesting. But you're right, Amazon's obsession with customers, the company's tracking 20-30% growth per year for the next 5-10 years because it just does one thing, and that's make sure that you have a pleasant experience as a customer and you come back.
There you go, and it's quite simple. Now, that's easier said than done, of course, pivoting to make adjustments to the environment. How do you actually pick a pivot? How do you know in due time, forgetting Corona for a second right now, how do you actually make that decision to say, I need to make a change?
That's a really good question, and if you think about driving a car, you drive a car looking at the windscreen, or at least I hope you do. You don't spend your time driving looking in the rearview mirror. Yet some businesses are very much about that whole mindset where they're looking in the rearview mirror. This is what we've always done. Because if you always do what you've always done, you always get what you've always got. And right now, what you're going to get is going to be nothing because the world has leapfrogged on. Look at restaurants. I've got a very good buddy who were at his restaurant actually for lunch a couple of weeks ago.
It was beautiful.
And he's reinvented his business in a heartbeat, turned very, very quickly. Another good example here on the Gold Coast would be Rickshaws. They're down at Burleigh, lovely place. But the restaurant was shut, so what do? They opened a pop-up, and do you know how smart they were? They saw the landlord that had just closed down a restaurant on Tedder Avenue because their business hadn't pivoted, and said, hey, we'll do a 4-month pop-up, can we use the kitchens, we'll pay your rent. Landlord's gone, yes please, and they've had a line of people around the door because they've been quick to get to the market with a very, very good idea that people can't go for dinner, but they can pick up takeaway.
So it's that forward thinking and then having the confidence to actually pull the trigger.
You've got to pull the trigger and you've got to do it, and you've got to be looking out the window at what's coming at you. And so many businesses rely on the story of yesteryear, which is why they'll be confined to the history books. And if we then take that as a segue into, as individuals, as people, what we can be doing on our investment journey, again, if you're looking in the rearview mirror, this is what I've always done, you're in for a very, very unpleasant surprise with what's coming down the line, because no one's been in a recession here for 30 years. And so the skill set, the muscle memory, the calloused mind of what you need to do in terms of being able to survive and thrive in that is sadly missing for so many people. So, if you're looking at it, well, I'm a property investor, fantastic, but we are going to have a weaker property market. If unemployment goes up to 20%, you're going to have a very, very weak property market. If you've got nobody having the ability to travel and people from overseas coming in as students, half of those rentals that have been built in the big cities to service the unis, there's no one to be there. And we're already seeing 1 in 7 investment properties are empty. Landlords are cutting rent to try and get tenants in. Great time to be a tenant, but terrible time to be a landlord and a property owner. Because any kind of yield you're going to get is gone, and you're running the serious risk of some significant falls in capital value of your property. So that's someone that's had the property mindset. Let's say you're someone that's had a stock market mindset and you've bought and held shares for dividend. Well, dividends have been cut; they're not likely to be expanded anytime soon. So if you're looking for income or cash flow, you've got to pivot into a strategy that's current and is delivering consistent results through that time. But most importantly, in order to be able to do that, you've got to recognize that the past was great, but things need to change moving forward. You can't rely on a model that worked yesteryear to work in very, very challenging conditions. And that's probably the most confronting thing for people, because this notion of, I'm not going to say being wrong, because that's quite confronting, but the bruise to the ego, that all the work that you've done to set yourself up with XYZ type investments is now not working. It doesn't mean to say you were wrong, and that's very important. It just means that you need to pivot and adjust what you're doing within there. And I think we spoke a few podcasts ago about the need to have a side hustle.
We did.
Now, for most people, the notion of taking a second job, why would I want to do that? A, I'm going to get taxed to hell by the government, but B, I already work hard, I'm busy, I don't need a second job. Well, you need to have a second income.
Sure.
And that's what the side hustle is really all about. To reduce that dependency on the job, in a weaker economy, and particularly if the employer, let's say you work for Meyer or David Jones, you better get your plan B sorted out pretty quick smart, because the chances are you're going to be moving from the column of people with a job to the column of people without fairly shortly.
That's another thing. Unemployment's already high enough, but job security has faded away massively. How can anyone feel secure in an environment that we're seeing, both in the economy and the businesses that are within it?
Look, I think it's a very arrogant thing to say I'm in control of this, I've got this, because there are so many unknowns and we don't know how long this is going to go on for, how severe it's going to be, what the global ramifications are with China and the US. There's so many variables that are sitting out there. What I think you've possibly got to do is take stock and go, well, look, if these guys are wrong and the economy turns out to be okay and I keep my job, what's my downside here? Oh, I've learned some new skills that help me make more money. That's my downside.
Terrible downside.
It's a terrible downside, right? You might have to forego a few episodes of Netflix or Stan in order to do that, so maybe that's the other downside if you wanted to measure that. You know, we've got 168 hours a week, how you choose to use them is up to you, but you can do an awful lot in that time if you want to. So, you know, the worst case scenario is what if we're wrong and the economy picks up, well, you know, another stream of income, happy days. But what if we're right and you go, okay, remember about 4 or 5 months ago, those guys, you know, the two idiots who sit in front of the sign and they're always nice to each other, you know, and they talked about something about pivoting. Well, maybe we should have a look at that. The problem is it's 6 months too late.
Sure.
You know, you dig the well before you need the water, and it's so easy right now to be head down in survival mode that you do forget to look out that front windscreen and see what's coming along the street. Good example last week, you know, at the restaurant owner down in Melbourne, you know, and it's a terrible conversation. I actually had to listen. It's a terrible conversation to listen to. This is a guy, you know, he's got his restaurant in Lygon Street. Everything's all open. He's just done his food order. He's got his stuff back in, feeling great. And then all of a sudden, boom, the door's shut again, and he's got all this food in there, which he's had to actually giving away to charity. He's a lovely guy, and he's got the credit card bill coming for ordering that food in probably about 10 days' time. And he's recognised that, okay, this is my core skill, my restaurant, but I can't run the risk of it being my only play. We've got him on board, and let's say in 3 to 6 months' time, things turn around and it's back to business as usual in the restaurant. He's going to have more cash flow than he's going to know what to do with because he's got his plan B. Same day, one of our team on our sales floor, talking to someone, oh, I'm busy in my business, I don't have time for this. Guess what? If you're in business, you're always going to be busy, right? That's not going to change until the day you sell it. And what if you're so busy you forget to look out the windscreen and before you know it, you get T-boned by a Mack truck over a recession, and all of a sudden you're there going, oh, let me learn. That taper, that lead time is gone. It's so important to pivot now and provision for what's coming.
So is the message get started, really?
As always, it's going to be get started. You know, I think they'll be putting me in the grave and they'll be saying, get started yesterday, and I'll be saying, make sure you got a stop loss. I'm sure it'll be on my epitaph somewhere along the line. But, you know, all of the evidence is pointing to the fact that we need to be jolted out of this comfort zone. And again, you know, we talked about, you know, benefit levels being too high. If you look at the difference between job seeker and minimum wage is $200 a week.
It's not a lot.
It's not a lot at all, and you think, well, yeah, no, it's not. The job seeker should be higher, but really, is that the case? Is that an incentive to get people working when, you know, if you go and bust your back for 40 hours and you're getting an extra $200 a week, that's $5 an hour. That's all you get marginally more by working versus staying on job seeker.
You may as well stay home.
You know, take your tax out of that, it's probably $3.50. So, you know, something's got to be done to incentivize people back in the workforce and do it quickly and to give people hope, because, you know, without hope, you know, what a sad world that we live in. And people deserve self-esteem of having a job. You don't deserve anything in life, but you deserve the level of self-esteem and have the opportunity to have a job. But you've got to get off your backside and do it. You deserve to have an opportunity for a brighter future. Get off your backside and provision yourself by pivoting now and going, pivot, what a waste of pivot now, build a side hustle, get that income flowing. And it doesn't matter what that side hustle is, whether it's what we do in terms of the stock market, which makes a lot of sense given the amount of money we're helping our clients make now, not in a year's time, but now. Whether it be an Amazon business, whether it be some other online type business, do something. What's the worst case scenario? It works and you make more money. You know, if you don't do anything and you just sit there, you run the risk of being the David Jones or the Maya where the insurer is going to pull the rug on you and say, we've got zero confidence that your business is going to be around in 6 months' time. So we'll sit on the sideline and watch. Now, what a terrible message that is to any stakeholders in either Maya or David Jones when they see that their insurer is going, yeah, we don't think you're going to make the count, you're out of it. And that's the risk that these businesses run, and it's not because of COVID, it's because way back when they made a decision that we're going to stick in department stores and we're not going to move with the times. Just like Fairfax when it stumped its nose at investing in real estate or car sales or Seek. No, we're going to keep with printed media because everybody loves reading a newspaper. And just like Kodak when they refused to get into digital photography, even though they invented it, because it might affect their film business. they're gone.
It's ludicrous, and you're absolutely right. Who picks up a newspaper these days, right? Look, I think there's a lot of good advice in there, Andrew, and it just stresses the importance of what's going on broader in the economy, within businesses. You have to make changes within yourself so that it doesn't get the better of you, because it's tough out there, and you have to have something to be able to back yourself up.
And it's a whole belief system. We talked about Amazon and its obsession over customer satisfaction and quick delivery and so on. And equally, just if you're in business and you go online, you can't just be in business but online. The whole DNA, the thought process needs to change, which is the learning curve that we've been through over the last 4 months, very successfully, I might add. The team have worked very, very hard to really engage our clients in a totally different way. So there's a mindset shift. It's not just the physical or online now. It's a whole mindset shift about how do we do business in this space to make it easy for people. And in the same way, if you're about to make a pivot personally with your side hustle, which you're going to need, it's no point just saying, I've got a side hustle. You've got to change that thought process for you as well. Not doing it because somebody's told you, but doing it because you relish the opportunity, as Kiyosaki says, of going from an employee to self-employed to a business owner to an investor. It's building that pathway out to keep yourself really, really structured in a multiple income stream way, but for the right reasons, not because you're being told to. You should be going, sheesh, this is kind of right, it resonates with me. We're looking out the windscreen. Who do I have to become? What development do I need to do as a person to be able to succeed as someone with a side hustle? Because there's a big shift between being an employee and doing stuff out on your own as well. And that's not to say to give up your job to do it. You might end up doing that, but that's not what we're starting out with. But that shift in mindset, the fact you haven't got a boss pushing you along or KPIs that are set by your manager, it's just you versus you. And that requires a huge shift mentally, that's for sure.
Absolutely, and you always say to me, the most amazing gifts can sometimes come in the most unusual wrapping paper. And if that's COVID-19, if that's the recession, if that's businesses going out of business, use the opportunity, because you never know, you might make the next Amazon, whatever it may be.
Well, somebody else did that 26 years ago and it's going okay, isn't it?
I've heard that, I've heard he goes okay.
It goes okay, back to his pre-divorce settlement level of wealth, and the business is growing 20-30% with customer satisfaction through the roof. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
There you go, there's our 5-year goal, AB. Thanks for having me on the broadcast. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I think there's a lot of good advice out there. And I guess the message is, get started, get pivoting.
Pivot well, my friend. There you go, guys. Pivot well. Give us a rating and a review. We'll look forward to seeing you on the show next week.